Hi, how's your dog doing? Okay, so we're back with another unscripted, I don't really know what, I guess just unscripted video. So hopefully you can read the title. So let's talk about why ignorance is not bliss. So the common saying, people say ignorance is bliss, and normally that's because the way we think of it is that the more you know, the sadder way you look at the world, such and such, or in a situation where, in a situation where maybe the truth might hurt you in some way. Take a relationship, for example, that one person was cheating on the other. That's a good example where someone might feel that ignorance would be bliss because, they'd still have a happy relationship, seemingly. There's that's kind of a surface level way of looking at it. But ignorance can definitely go way deeper than that. So first, let's just define ignorance. If you watched my last video, technically there's no way to define ignorance, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to say that ignorance is just some lack of knowledge. Whether someone chooses to be ignorant or they don't choose to be, I'm just defining ignorance as some sort of lack of knowledge. Or, the quality of lacking knowledge in some area. So I have fewer notes than last time, because most of what I have here is just a diagram I'm gonna hopefully show on screen at some point in this video, because I think it's pretty helpful. Because the first point I have written down here is, we value the truth more. That there may be things that we value more than just happiness or bliss. Like I just said, the truth. The truth is a good example of this because, most people would probably want to know that if their partner's cheating on them, even if it hurts, because it's better to know the truth to most people than to just be living a lie. And when you really think about it, you might ask, well, why is that? Like, we want to be happy all the time. Why would we purposely choose something just because it's true? But I think it's just because people value the truth more, and as a species, it allows us to evaluate our connections between others more. If we were just lying all the time, hiding our faults, we would never know what members of our group would be bad, could be not a great investment to be around, for example. So that probably is part of it. Possibly, I don't know. I'm not a biologist or an anthropologist. I'm just a person who has some interests in that area. And the way I personally see it is that, the truth's not going to change. No matter what, the truth is never going to change, whether you want it to be a certain way or not. And I know that's definitely related to my liking of Stoicism and being a Stoic myself. The way I see it, the truth is going to be the way it is, and anything else is irrational because the world is the way it is. You can't have it be any other way. Obviously, there are things you can change, like with yourself, and you can influence things, of course. Don't forget the power of influence. But you cannot directly do anything yourself. So if it's something you just can't control, just accept it and move on, because at the end of the day, the truth is the truth. The world is the way it is. It's not going to change no matter what you do. And possibly as a counter, some people, counter to the earlier point, some people might actually prefer being happy or living in a state of bliss rather than have the truth. Some people actually would prefer that. And I think in many cases, most people actually would prefer that in some cases. I mean, there are plenty of times when people are like, oh, no, don't tell me. I don't want to be hurt. Why don't you want to know the truth? Because they don't want to have their conception of something broken. There are definitely cases where we value the truth more, but there are also cases where we value our own happiness more, or our own enjoyment more, or our own pleasure more, or something along those lines. I mean, if someone had knowledge of partner cheating, I don't know why I keep on coming to that example. It's just a very good one, I guess, to demonstrate the concept. But if someone were to do that, some people would just say, don't tell me, I don't want to know. I don't want to have that conception broken. So there definitely are people who don't want to know the truth. And I think to a certain degree, many of us don't want to know the truth. I mean, how many times have you chosen not to do something just because you didn't want to see what it was like? A personal example with me recently is some of my friends have been trying to get me to listen to the Arctic Monkeys. Now, I've listened to some of their music, and I'm just personally not a fan. I'm not saying that they're bad. Just for what they do, I listen to artists who they're more sonically interesting to me. That's not very related, but that's kind of the point. At least I did listen, and some people would just say, no, I don't want to listen because I have what I want. That is ignorance, because you don't know whether you like it or not. You're choosing not to. And that's not some form of me saying that I'm high and mighty. That's just an example. There are certainly an endless number of examples where I've chosen not to do something because I didn't want to see what it's like, because I was unwilling to change my mind. I am 100% sure that there has been some other situation like that I could bring up for myself. Now, I guess another point I want to talk on is that too, I guess kind of related to the first one, but I'll consider it separate because that was kind of something else that I was just talking. It's kind of something else I was just talking about. My notes here. So it's kind of that most people are ignorant. Now, obviously, people are going to be ignorant about some things. Not everyone's going to know about the geopolitical climate of, of Sri Lanka. Most people aren't going to know that kind of thing, obviously, unless you're from there. Or I guess a similar area. There's most people want to, not necessarily want to, but kind of maybe even just are, or maybe even choose to be ignorant about very many things. I mean, a pretty big example I could give is people who are like climate change deniers. I'm not trying to treat them as an out group. I mean, they're still people, but I think that's a group of people who a lot of the time just want to remain ignorant because they don't want to hear the facts. I'm not saying that they're stupid people. I'm not saying that. I mean, there are definitely people who are ignorant about certain things. I do think I don't want to make this political, and I think it's sad that something that should be a scientific thing has to be politicized, but yeah. This is not meant to be this is not meant to be political in nature. I'm just giving an example of something that we, kind of know is true. As well, many people kind of don't want to ask many of the big questions in their lives. A lot of people don't want to ask, what am I here for? What am I supposed to be doing with my life? People don't want to ask, what happens when we die? I mean, there's death anxiety where we are actually afraid of our death, so we try not to think about it. That's a very real thing that many, if not most, people have. Yeah, and generally most people do choose to be ignorant about those things because it could be out of laziness, or they just don't want to they don't want to confront what happens by asking those kinds of questions. So this kind of forces me to lead into my little diagram axis thing. I don't really know what to call this, but it's a graph, not a graph, but it's an image that kind of shows what I kind of how I think things are. So you can see it's formatted a little weirdly, but on the right side you have knowledge. You have a system or a plan or an action. On the left side you have no system or no plans or inaction, and then on the top it goes knowledge, or perceived knowledge at least, and on the bottom it has ignorance, and it kind of shows like the states that you're in each quadrant. So again, hopefully I showed that. So I kind of want to go into this a little more because I think it kind of explains a lot of things that I have seen or experienced myself. So first, I kind of want to elaborate more on this whole knowledge versus ignorance and system or plan or action versus no system or no plan or inaction. So, the point of me making this is that the whole point is not necessarily a distinction just between knowledge and ignorance, but it is also a distinction between having a system in place and not having a system in place, or plan, or whatever. These words in the columns are pretty interchangeable. I'll just go with system because that one's the easiest and it's the most general. It can be used in quite a few ways, so I'll use system. So it kind of led me to think about it this way, which ties back to most people being ignorant. So how come most people are ignorant? Like, obviously, like, we don't want to ask these questions and such, but how can we go on with our lives without doing that? Or at least not doing it that much. And if you can see in the bottom right corner, that's because we have a system or a plan or action. So, for example, many people will grow up with this system of go to school, work hard, go to college, get good grades in school and in college, get a job, work, start a family, retire, die. That's a system that most people are brought up in. So essentially, when you think about it this way, you can be happy, quote unquote happy. That's why it's called false happiness. You can be ignorant and still have a system or plan or an action in place, and you can still live a life and just be ignorant. That's kind of what made me realize that, is that people kind of just go about their lives without really thinking about these things because they have a set view, they have a set way of looking at the world and a set way of going about life. I also have a version with arrows. I don't know if that one's being shown right now. I hope it is, because this is not necessarily the start of a path, but if you're in this false happiness area, you're most likely to go to the next quadrant on the left, which is ignorance and no system or no plan or inaction. So to help out with this whole idea is, let's say that you're in the woods. You're in the woods right now. How would ignorance and the system play into that? So ignorance and system would be, you don't know what woods you're in, you don't know where you are, but you do know that you should be going north for some reason. So you're going to continue. It doesn't make too much sense if you look too deeply into it, but just go with it for now. So your system is to continue going north, and your ignorance is you don't know where you are. So as long as you have a system in place to guide you, you're still going to be not that afraid. You're still going to be okay. You're going to at least feel okay. So it brings about this false happiness. So that's why the arrow's there, because eventually at some point, you're probably going to get to the point where you realize, I don't know where I am, and you're going to realize that system just that system just go north, go north, go north is kind of flawed. And I think this can happen to anybody who thinks about things. They will end up ignorant because they don't know what to do, but they don't really have a system because they rejected it or realize that it's wrong or something. That's the thing. So I consider people who are afraid or lost in life are those who are ignorant about what to do, who are ignorant about things. They have no knowledge. They have not necessarily just like intelligence, but just little knowledge about something. This can generally be for anything. This can be for an activity. This can be for really anything. This can be for an activity. This can be for your life. So a lot of people are kind of lost in the world because they don't know what to do and they don't have a way of navigating that. It's like being in the ocean. You don't know where you are and you don't know where you should be going. You have no idea. Because this is definitely a different thing from being ignorant and having a system in place for living or a system in place for doing something. You're just lost or you're afraid. Because in the wood situation, and if you don't know where you are and you don't know where to go, you're just going to be lost. You're going to be afraid. You're not going to know what to do because there's so many possibilities out there and you don't know what to do with each one. Again, I'll probably go through all of these like multiple times to elaborate more on them. So this is like the first round of me going through all these quadrants. So then after that, you can go to the perceived or just the knowledge, but no system quadrant. So if we're using the woods analogy, that is like, you know what woods you're in, but you don't know where to go. You don't know how you're gonna get home. You're lost in the woods and you know what woods you're in, but you have no idea how you're gonna get to where you need to go next. And this is kind of why people say that ignorance is bliss, because they think of it this way, where you know something but you don't know what to do with this knowledge. You just have this knowledge sitting around. And this is something that I have experienced personally myself. Now, it wasn't like depression, not like an actual, the true condition. When I was younger, I would just, go look up stuff on the internet, or like just go look for random facts, or like I'd have all these different pieces of knowledge sitting around in my mind, and I had no idea what to do with them. I had the knowledge. I had knowledge about some science stuff, some philosophical ideas, some history, all this stuff, some linguistics ideas, all this stuff jumbled around in my mind. But I did not know what to do with it, or I had no way of using it. I just had it sitting around. So I was just stuck here, obviously not like truly depressed, but in this quote unquote depression stage that I've labeled here. Now, why I've called it depression is because this is what happens to, some people who get into like that nihilistic point of view. Because again, this is perceived knowledge, not absolute knowledge. So, I'm not, if you're religious, again, this is perceived knowledge from your perspective on the atheist part. If you're atheist or agnostic, this would be perceived knowledge on the religious person's part, because this can work for anybody. Like you can have, like as a religious person, it'd be very weird to have like this perceived knowledge of the supernatural, but to not have a system for it. That's what religions are kind of for, but it is definitely something that could happen. So this would probably happen a lot to these nihilistic type people, where they see it as, my life has no meaning, the world has no meaning, but they can't do anything with it. Like they have no way of still living or going about things without it. That's why I kind of label this depression thing, because a lot of people fall into that and they become very depressed, just sitting around, moping around, not in a derogatory sense, but just, they're sad, they're depressed, because they're sitting thinking, my life has no meaning and there's nothing I can do. They don't know where to go. They're lost, kind of. But they're just kind of in this depression state. And the perceived knowledge, with a system and a plan of action, that's what I like to call true happiness. Because ignorance with a system or plan or action is false happiness, because that system can be taken away from you and you can be left with just ignorance and no system or plan in action, and you're just lost. So, this is not necessarily a cycle. You could, in theory, go from ignorance with a system or plan straight to true happiness. I find it, just like if you started here, this might be, this could be the progression you go on. Like if you started with false happiness, like it kind of moves in a cycle. But, false happiness could, in theory, go to knowledge with a system and plan, or plan of action. Just, I find that to be less likely than being ignorant and having a system and then losing that system. Like, I find that to be more likely than being ignorant and having a system to then gaining knowledge and still being in that system. You know what I mean? Like, from like a purely abstract point of view, how would it not be likely to be ignorant and having a system and then going to knowledge? Well, again, let's look at this from like a religious angle. If you're ignorant about things, but you still have like a way of living based on a religion, you're very unlikely to gain knowledge about things and still use that same system. You know what I mean? Like, you're unlikely to still use that religion. Like, I'm not saying that religious people are ignorant, but just like blindly following a religion. You know what I mean? Like, if you're blindly following a religion, just following its systems or plans and actions because that's just what your parents taught you, not because you actually have knowledge of the religion, I find it unlikely that you'll just gain that knowledge and still, like, immediately still be a part of the religion. You know what I mean? I find it more likely that you'll realize, then you'll lose it, and then you could come back to it in theory. Or, let's say that you're trying to learn a new skill and you're ignorant about it, but you still have a system for learning it. You might realize that system's wrong. Like, it's much more likely that you'd realize that system for learning something is wrong. Let's say, like, you're learning a language and you started off with school. Like, you're less likely to learn knowledge of how to learn that language better and still be learning it in school. You know what? Like, that's kind of where I'm going with this. Like, it's less likely for you to still use a system in place when you gain knowledge. Because once you gain knowledge, you're most likely to have a better system in place than you would when you were ignorant. So that's why I don't have an arrow going from ignorance with a system to knowledge with a system. It's okay. So this video is quite long and I haven't talked about too much, but let's talk about knowledge with a system or a plan and action in place. And that's where I would like to believe that I am now. And I'd like to believe I'm there now. I've kind of been everywhere throughout the cycle in many different areas of my life. I've been in that system for just like ways of looking at the world. I've been in that system for many skills I possess, like learning languages or playing instruments, because I love music. I love instruments. I'll just say guitar because that's the one I've had to do the most self-learning and most, like, I've still had a teacher, but I've had to do the most learning on my own through that. So I've gone through this system myself with music. I've gone through this system with YouTube even. I didn't really know what I was doing when I started out, but I still had a system, like, still make the video, still post stuff. I mean, am I perfect right now? No, but I know what I need to do, and I have a system for doing it. Just for me right now, it's actually implementing that system and that knowledge fully. It's integrating it fully. That's kind of like what I need to work on right now. So there's no arrow after this, because most of the time, once you get to this knowledge with a system place, you're very unlikely to backtrack or go somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you could go back to like knowledge with no system if you think that system's wrong, but you still have the knowledge you need. Like, just your way of going about something was wrong, we still have the knowledge. That's possible. It's not incredibly likely, but it's like, if you have the right knowledge for that thing, your system will probably reflect your correct knowledge. As in, like, if you have the right knowledge, you're probably likely to follow the right system and choose the right plan. But it is possible to go back if you just mistakenly chose the wrong plan. Again, it's very unlikely you're gonna lose your knowledge Like, maybe that can happen with a science where, science changes, our understanding of the world changes. We go from thinking that diseases are caused by, like, evil spirits and fog and cloud, whatever it was, like some supernatural type thing, to our knowledge of medicine. I mean, or not modern knowledge of medicine. I mean, you could look at it that way, like, but that's not really, again, I put it as perceived knowledge to be more general, because there are some things where, like, you can't really know them, like philosophy, like in philosophy, the point is knowledge, but again, some things just might not work. But if you have knowledge within a certain system, or knowledge within a certain area, or knowledge within a set view of looking at things, then you can still have a system for that. Which I kind of use a lot of these terms interchangeably, so I might sound like I'm backtracking myself, or contradicting myself, or just rambling on and on and on. And that's because I use so many terms interchangeably in my mind that sometimes I forget that I've already used this term in a different sense somewhere else when I've already spoken. So my system plan action is a way of doing things. And I guess, like, knowledge has to be within a certain area. Like, it can't just be general knowledge. It has to be all knowledge within an area. So, like, a system within that area. So let's say you have, for example, let's go through this in terms of philosophy. So you could start with ignorance. You know nothing about philosophy, but you still have a way of looking at things just from, like, your culture, your parents, your family, your friends, all those things. And then you might realize, oh, this system, this way that I've been living my life, it doesn't work. It's not real. It's not true. It doesn't really reflect reality, whatever you want to say. So you get into that lost stage where you're ignorant, but you don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. So then you start doing some research, which doing research and, like, learning stuff should be a video that's coming up at some point. Like, I've written it down. I already have some general outlines for that video, so that should be a video you see at some point. Not necessarily like researching stuff for a paper, but just to gain knowledge. This is kind of like how I've done it myself. Because again, the point of this channel, Plymothy. So then you start doing research, you're learning things. So you have the knowledge. You learn general philosophical concepts. You learn a little bit from each. You learn some ancient stuff. You learn some modern stuff. You read some Camus. You read some Kierkegaard, you read some Nietzsche, you read some Plato, some Aristotle, some Thomas Aquinas, Kant. You've been around in terms of philosophically speaking. So you have all this knowledge, but you still don't have a plan or a system yet. So you're just kind of like sitting with this knowledge. You have nothing to do with it. You have no release for it. And then finally you settle on a plan or a system or plan of action. So maybe for you, with all your knowledge, you've gone with Kant's moral system, or you've gone with Stoicism, or you've gone with absurdism with Camus, or you've gone with Platonism. You end up with knowledge from an area, and then you choose a system within that area. So that's kind of the whole cycle. So I guess the title of this video is that ignorance is not bliss, and I kind of talked about that, but this is more so the path out of ignorance as well. I'm not just telling you that some people are ignorant. I'm not just telling you that ignorance is bad. Most people kind of know that ignorance is not great. But this is also the path out of it. Maybe you're in that false happiness stage. And now maybe I just, like, made you ponder something, I don't know, and you're out of it now. But where do you go? You learn stuff. You go to the library. People don't go to the library. You go to the internet. You watch some YouTube videos or whatever. You gain some knowledge. This process can take as long as you need it to. This isn't a process that's a day long, most likely not. I'd say that this process would take at least 2 weeks to get through, depending on where you are. And this process could be lifelong. It could be something that takes years to do. It could take decades or entire life to get through. It really could. it just depends on what you're applying it to. So this is kind of my system for looking at everything I do. This is kind of how I go through my life. This is how I think about my life. Where am I in this quadrant thing? Where am I in this diagram right now? For example, before I started talking about a lot of this stuff on this channel, I had a bunch of knowledge about linguistics and history and philosophy and all this stuff, and I had no way of using it. This channel now gives me a system to go through with using that. I can teach it to people. I can show it to people. I can help people. I have gone through this process with many skills I have learned as well. Language learning. I started off with ignorance with a plan. I started off by doing the stuff most people do, like memorizing grammar tables for Latin. Then I ended up with, I don't know anything about Latin and I don't know what to do. Then I went to, hey, I know some knowledge about, not just about Latin, but about language learning in general. And I just didn't have a system. Then finally had the system, which was the natural method or the comprehensible input method, how you want to call it. And that's where I am now. I have the knowledge of what I need to do and I have a system for using it. I have comprehensible input, the natural method, and I have the knowledge I need. I have the right books. I have everything I need to do this. So I implore you to go through everything in your life and think, where am I in this quadrant? Where am I in this diagram? Am I ignorant with the system? Do I have knowledge that's just sitting around with no way of using it? Am I at true happiness where I have my knowledge and I'm using it? And by knowledge, I don't mean you have the entire picture. There's still room for learning, but I'm saying you have enough knowledge for this system to use it. As you learn, it's continuing the fuel for the system. It adds more energy into the system. Obviously, this isn't gonna work with physics, not the not the actual scientific field of physics, but I just mean once you have that knowledge, it can kind of be in a loop forever where the knowledge feeds the system, or you can add more and more knowledge to it. And I'd recommend that you add more and more knowledge to it. Because, for example, with Stoicism, I took my philosophical knowledge and I was like, hey, I'll go with Stoicism. And I am not just a Stoic. I also view the world from many different perspectives. The Stoicism's one I can advertise more. It's one I can talk about a little more. The other main one, I want to keep very secret until some other video where I talk about my favorite philosopher of all time. I did mention him in this video, so you can figure out who that is. But even when I had a system of looking at the world philosophically speaking, I still had more knowledge to gain. I've definitely learned more about Stoicism than I knew. I've learned more about philosophy. I've learned more about Stoicism, learned more about philosophy in general. I know more than I did when I first discovered Stoicism. I know a lot more than I did. I have a better understanding of the system that I'm using Stoicism, and it also gives me more knowledge to use within that system. So genuinely, I recommend that you take a screenshot maybe of my little diagram quadrant thing. Every time there's something that you want to learn or anything like that, just think about where you are in this diagram, what quadrant you're in, and think about how I can move from this one to the next one. How can I progress? How can I get better? How can I get to that true happiness stage where I have the knowledge I need, or I'm continuing to get knowledge? I have enough knowledge and I'm continuing to get knowledge. I have a system or a plan or action I can use that knowledge for. Because this is not just something for productivity or utility. This will make you happier. This will lead you to living a better life. And I want that better life for you. So, if you enjoyed this video, I hope you did. Again, I'm still trying out these unscripted videos. I hope people like them. My other one only got 400 views thus far, but it did give me quite a bit of watch time due to its length. So I might continue to make more of these because, I like what I'm doing here. I like discussing these topics. So, yeah, I'm having fun with these. Let's just say that. I'm definitely enjoying making these videos. They're a lot of fun to just sit here for 30 minutes to an hour and just here for 20 minutes to an hour and just talk about stuff. And it doesn't require that much editing, so I can still get it out pretty quickly. If I really want to, I could probably put out multiple videos in a week if I wanted to, if I ever worked quickly enough on these. So if you want more of these, like if you prefer these over the more structured videos, I will actually do these more because these are fun. This is like my perfect outlet for all my knowledge. This is bringing me to the true happiness stage right now. Yeah, this is a great outlet for all the ideas I have in my mind that I can't communicate with other people. Because if you can't tell based on my voice and how it's been changing over the past few years of this channel, I'm still pretty young. So most people my age don't really want to talk about philosophy and linguistics and history and all the stuff that I like learning about and talking about. But most people who are older than me don't really want to talk to me because of my age. They're just like, oh, come on, what does he know? So I can't really have like in-depth, serious conversations with people about this kind of stuff. And again, there's also just people who are older than me who don't care about it either, of course. But this is like a good outlet for me to get my ideas out there and to finally say things. So if you want to hear more of it, I'm not saying I necessarily prefer these to the scripted videos. They're getting pretty equal in my mind, though. Like I will definitely not mind making more of these. I would not mind these being a regular thing because I enjoy making them. This is fun. Just like the regular videos are. So, if you prefer these, I'll make more. If you don't, I'll make fewer. If you like them as much, I'll make an equal amount of both. All right, that's all. Tell your dog I said hi.